The smell of burnt iron and wet earth filled the air, a grim perfume for the battlefield. Captain Kaelen Varrus, his armor scratched and dented, stood shoulder to shoulder with the few remaining men of the Aerthos royal guard. Their objective, the Shadow Citadel, the southernmost fortress of the vampire kingdom of Solari, was technically secured, but the cost had been catastrophic. Kaelen wiped the blood from his eyes, the deep red matching the twilight sky bleeding through the Gothic arches of the captured courtyard. His loyalty was absolute, his purpose simple: protect the king, destroy the night court. He had lived by that oath since he was old enough to hold a sword, and he would die by it. A sudden, unnatural stillness descended. The muffled sounds of looting and distant cries of victory vanished, replaced by a silence heavier than any storm. Kaelen felt the hair stand up on the back of his neck, a primal alarm overriding his soldiers' training. He signaled his men to defensive positions, his own hand gripping the hilt of his broadsword so tightly his knuckles turned white. From the great cathedral doors at the courtyard's end, doors the royal guard had spent 3 agonizing hours breaching, a figure emerged. She was not a creature of shadow, but of impossible radiance and absolute darkness. Her dress, the color of a starless midnight, flowed like liquid around her, and her face was a masterpiece of cold, immortal beauty, framed by a crown that resembled both horns and sharp, perfect crystal. But it was her eyes, glowing with an incandescent, hypnotic red, that truly held the air captive. Queen Lyra Aethelred, the Vampire Queen, the blight upon the human world, stood before them. She had not fled. She had simply been waiting. Such defiance, Lyra's voice resonated, not loud, but carrying a chilling power that bypassed Kaelen's ears and settled directly in his bones. A commendable effort, little soldier. But ultimately futile. Kaelen roared a battle cry, trying to shake off the paralyzing fear, and charged. His men followed, driven by duty and sheer desperation. But Lyra did not move. She merely raised a hand, and the heavy atmosphere solidified around Kaelen and his companions. They struck the invisible wall with the sickening thud of metal on stone. Kaelen fell, the air knocked from his lungs, his muscles refusing to obey the commands of his mind. He watched, helpless, as Lyra walked slowly toward him, her bare footsteps making no sound on the broken flagstones. She paused directly over him, the hem of her gown pooling around his armored boots. The red light in her eyes intensified, scrutinizing him as if he were a specimen under glass. "You carry the scent of true devotion, Captain Kaelen Varrus," she murmured, a trace of something like amusement in her tone. "It is a rare vintage even in the human realm." Kaelen tried to spit defiance, but only a desperate gasp escaped. He was completely, utterly defeated, not by skill or strength, but by a power that belonged to the elements themselves. He braced for the final blow, expecting a fang in his throat or a shadow blade through his heart. What he received was infinitely worse. Lyra knelt, bringing her face close to his, and placed one cold, exquisite hand upon his armored chest. Kaelen felt a terrifying invasion, a crushing pressure that seemed to bypass the metal and pierce his very soul. A brilliant, sickening pink energy erupted from his chest, the very essence of his life, his will, his inherent humanity, and flowed, a tether of pure light, from his heart to the queen's hand. The agony was immediate, soul-shattering, and absolute. It was the feeling of being unmade. He was aware of the horrifying spectacle, the vivid image of his heart's core being drained away, before the darkness finally took him. When Kaelen awoke, the battle was over, the silence was real, and the Gothic chamber was lit by tall, flickering red candles. His armor was gone, replaced by soft, foreign black silk. He was kneeling just as he had been in his final memory, but now he knelt on polished obsidian. Above him stood Lyra Aethelred, majestic and terrifying, her winged shadow engulfing him entirely. He looked down and saw his hands, his human, soldier's hands, trembling violently. He knew with a certainty that erased all past oaths and future hopes, that he was no longer his own. The vibrant energy he had seen leave his chest had been more than life force, it had been the core of his free will. "Welcome, Kaelen," the queen said, her voice now possessing a seductive silkiness that wrapped around his remaining senses. "You are bound now. My property. The soldier is dead. My new shadow consort has risen." She tilted her head, a cruel, beautiful smile touching her lips. "Your first command, look at me and tell me you accept your queen." Kaelen tried to refuse. Every fiber of his being screamed revolt, demanding he strike her down. But the terrifying emptiness in his chest, the tether to the cold hand above him, overruled the protest. His head slowly rose. His eyes, now dull and obedient, met the predatory crimson of hers. The words tasted like ash, but they came out steady and clear. "I accept, my queen." The nightmare had begun. The soldier had fallen, and the queen had claimed his soul. The air in the throne room of the night court was thick with the scent of ancient dust, cold stone, and something undefinably, dangerously powerful. Kaelen's new attire, silken black tunic and trousers that felt absurdly soft and utterly alien, offered no protection against the chilling atmosphere, mental or physical. He stood a respectful distance behind Queen Lyra's obsidian throne, his posture ramrod straight, the years of soldier discipline the only thing anchoring him in this terrifying new reality. The command to look at me and accept had shattered something fundamental within him, leaving an obedient void where his personal will had once resided. He was a weapon now, a glorified shadow pointed only at the queen's bidding. Lyra dismissed the elder vampires who had been reporting to her. These were creatures of immense age, draped in heavy velvets and dark silver, their eyes mirroring the queen's crimson glow, though theirs lacked her terrifying intensity. They moved with a silent, arrogant grace. As the last one bowed and melted into the shadows of the immense chamber, one particular figure paused, his gaze sharp and calculating on Kaelen. This was Lord Valerius, Lyra's established second-in-command, a vampire whose arrogance was barely masked by courtesy. Valyrius's lips curled into a barely perceptible sneer. "The new acquisition is fascinating, my queen. Such a fragile vessel to hold such potential. I trust the claim was made cleanly?" Lyra didn't turn, running a long, elegant finger along the armrest of her throne. "The acquisition was necessary, Valyrius. His loyalty was not merely given. It was forged in a crucible of honor few immortals could comprehend. And yes, the soul tether is absolute. Kaelen is mine, mind and body. Do not test it." Her voice was quiet, yet it carried an undeniable threat that made Valyrius stiffen. "Of course not, my queen," Valyrius replied, bowing low, his resentment palpable. "I merely wonder about the wisdom of keeping a human so close to the heart of our operations, especially one who recently fought against us with such fervor. His fervor is now my fervor. His hatred for the night court has been replaced by devotion to its queen. Consider him a necessary experiment, Valyrius. Now leave us." Valyrius hesitated for a fraction of a second too long, but then silently retreated, his heavy cloak swishing as he vanished. Kaelen watched him go, feeling no malice, no fear, only the queen's quiet satisfaction resonating through the bond. Lyra finally rose, her black wings subtly shifting behind her, catching the dim candlelight. The movement was mesmerizing. She descended the steps, stopping directly in front of Kaelen. Up close, the power radiating off her was overwhelming, a dizzying blend of cold strength and ancient sorrow. "Valyrius is a loyal servant, but predictable," Lyra spoke, her voice low, intimate, and entirely commanding. "He fears what he cannot control, and he cannot control what he does not understand. You, Kaelen, are the unknown factor." She reached up, her cold fingertips tracing the newly formed scar on his jaw, a reminder of the battle that had ended his life and started this one. "Tell me, soldier," she commanded, the bond tightening. "What is your purpose now?" Kaelen responded instantly, the words echoing the core emptiness within him. "To serve the will of Queen Lyra Aethelred. My purpose is her fulfillment. My life is her domain." A genuine yet dark smile touched her lips. "Good. You learn quickly. Your life as a soldier taught you discipline. That discipline is now mine. I have plans for you far beyond standing guard. But first you must learn to walk the halls of Solari without flinching. You must understand the nature of your new mistress." She took his hand, it was a casual touch, yet it sent a jolt of icy energy straight through the tether to his chest. He felt compelled to follow as she led him out of the throne room and into the vast, winding passages of the night court. It was a palace carved from shadow and ancient stone, lit only by deep crimson braziers and moonlight filtering through stained glass windows depicting scenes of vampire ascendancy and human subjugation. Kaelen realized he was walking through the enemy's heart, a place he had sworn to destroy, now his involuntary home. They reached a secluded chamber, dominated by a massive bed draped in crimson velvet. Lyra turned, her eyes burning. "Your duties are not yet clear, Kaelen. But your submission must be absolute, and your faith in me must be unshakable. Tonight you will rest. Tomorrow your true servitude begins. You will be my ears, my eyes and my shield even against those of my own blood who resent your presence." She watched him for a long moment, a possessive, predatory look in her eyes. "You are bound by my soul tether, but remember, Captain, That tether is also your only anchor in this court of wolves. Fail me and I will not simply kill you. I will reclaim every last fragment of your soul and scatter the dust of your memory across the plains of Aerthos. Kaelen bowed, the action now coming naturally, instinctively. Understood, my queen. As Lyra finally left the chamber, locking the heavy, ornamental door behind her, the silence returned. Kaelen stood alone in the dark room, the soft, rich surroundings mocking his former hard life in the barracks. He walked to a window carved high into the wall, offering a view of the sprawling, shadowed kingdom of Solari. He pressed his forehead against the cold stone, fighting the residual instincts of his past life. He was a prisoner, but worse, he was a willing one. The soldier was a ghost, and the shadow was beginning to take root. He was Lyra's, and the terrifying, beautiful truth was that a part of him, the deepest, most controlled part, accepted the vampire queen who had claimed his soul. Kaelen's days in the night court quickly settled into a routine as rigorous and exhausting as any military drill, yet infinitely more insidious. Lyra did not require him to patrol or fight common threats. She required absolute internal surrender. His training was centered not on combat skills, which she seemed to consider sufficiently honed, but on mastering the nuances of the soul-tether. She used the bond daily, sometimes hourly, sending sharp, intrusive commands directly into his consciousness, testing the boundaries of his obedience. Retrieve that chalice, she would murmur from across the cavernous dining hall, and Kaelen would find himself moving before the sound of her voice had fully dissipated, his body acting on the mental directive. On one occasion, during a tense council meeting, she projected a powerful wave of pure, agonizing despair through the bond, just to observe his physical reaction. He collapsed instantly, gripping his chest, the phantom pain of his fragmented soul screaming, while Lyra remained impassive, watching from her throne. As quickly as it came, the pain vanished, replaced by an intoxicating wave of calm and devotion. Your emotions are liabilities, Kaelen, she had instructed him later, her tone clinical. The terror, the regret, the loyalty to your former king, they are distractions. I have claimed the core of your will, but you must learn to silence the noise surrounding it. I am your only truth now. This constant manipulation left Kaelen perpetually weary, his mind a battleground where the ghost of his former identity fought a losing war against the undeniable control of the queen. He still retained his memories, the faces of his fallen comrades, the oath he swore to Aerthos, but those memories were now encased in ice, powerful visuals that evoked no feeling. They were history, not motivation. His presence caused an open ripple of disdain among the elder vampires, led fiercely by Lord Valerius. Valyrius often found opportunities to confront Kaelen in the twisting, shadowed corridors of the court. One evening, Kaelen was tasked with guarding the entrance to Lyra's personal study. Valyrius approached him, moving with the serpentine grace of a seasoned predator. Still playing at being a sentinel, little soldier? Valyrius purred, leaning close. His breath was cold, carrying a metallic tang. You reek of humanity, Varrus. A scent that is growing tiresome in our ancient halls. Kaelen remained silent, his gaze fixed straight ahead, an expressionless mask of stone. He was under orders not to speak to any vampire unless directly addressed by the queen, a clever rule by Lyra to both maintain his control and fuel Valyrius's frustration. Do you know why the queen keeps you? Valerius continued, circling him slowly. Not for your strength. We have legions of better warriors. Not for your insight. You are a simple, provincial man. She keeps you because she enjoys breaking beautiful, honorable things. She enjoys the spectacle of your humiliation. He stopped, his face mere inches from Kaelen's. Remember your comrades, Captain. Remember the smell of the blood you swore to avenge. Is this the noble end of Captain Kaelen Varrus? A kneeling puppet, waiting for his mistress's command to breathe? Kaelen felt the flicker of the old rage, a desperate, tiny spark deep inside his chest. But the instant that emotion threatened to take hold, the soul-tether tightened sharply. It wasn't Lyra consciously commanding him, it was the automatic defense mechanism of the bond, extinguishing rebellious thoughts. Kaelen involuntarily stumbled back a half-step, a soundless gasp escaping him. Valerius watched the reaction with narrowed, satisfied eyes. The leash is short tonight. Be a good little dog, Captain. Your true purpose is not service but sacrifice. You are a trinket that will soon be discarded. Valerius laughed, a low, unpleasant sound, and strode away, vanishing into the darkness. The encounter served its purpose. It reinforced the isolation of Kaelen's position. He was hated by the immortals and utterly divorced from the world he once protected. He was nothing but a channel for Lyra's will. A few days later, Lyra finally gave him his first true mission. They stood on a high balcony, overlooking the vast, forested territory of Solari, bathed in sickly moonlight. "I need eyes in the kingdom of Aerthos," Kaelen, Lyra announced, her voice soft but absolute. "I need to understand how the king is reacting to the loss of the Shadow Citadel. I cannot send my own kind, they carry the mark of the night too heavily." She turned, her red eyes locking onto his. "You, however, bear the mark of duty and allegiance. You were a celebrated soldier. You will return to the capital, pose as a survivor and gather intelligence. You will locate their new fortifications, identify their vulnerable supply lines, and find out the name of the general leading the counteroffensive." Kaelen felt a cold dread that pierced even the numbness of the tether. Going back. Seeing familiar faces. Betraying his king actively, not just passively. It was the ultimate test. "My queen," he spoke, the title now rolling off his tongue without conscious effort. "If I return to Aerthos, my former comrades will try to question me. They may try to rescue me." Lyra smiled, a predatory expression of sheer delight. "Precisely. And that is why I need you to understand something crucial, Kaelen. The tether binds your will, but it enhances your abilities. You are faster, stronger, and far more resistant to pain than any normal man now. Should anyone attempt to rescue you, or should they discover your true allegiance?" She placed a cold hand on his cheek. "You will kill them. Without hesitation. The tether ensures your compliance, but I want to ensure your motivation. Consider this. Failure to comply means I will not kill you. I will use the tether to force you to watch, fully conscious, as I slowly and painlessly obliterate the memory of your entire life. You will be an empty shell, a soldier without a history. Go, Captain," she commanded, stepping back. "Use your old identity but remember your new master. The game begins." Kaelen bowed deeply, his mind already calculating routes and cover stories, his soldier instincts merging terrifyingly with his new enforced loyalty. He was heading home, not as a hero or a prisoner, but as a deeply embedded, unwilling weapon of the Vampire Queen. The journey from the dark, imposing borders of Solari back into the familiar, sunlit, albeit still war-torn, lands of Aerthos was a dizzying reversal. Kaelen traveled under the cover of night, using his honed military knowledge to bypass patrols, but he moved with a speed and stealth that was entirely new, a cold gift from his queen. He was stronger, his senses sharper, every shadow a potential ally. He arrived near the capital city of Aerthos just before dawn, ditching the Solari silk for a set of scavenged, recognizable soldiers' fatigues, deliberately torn and mud-caked to simulate a rough escape. When he finally walked into the perimeter of the hastily erected forward base, the sight of the familiar watchtowers and the banner of Aerthos almost broke through the icy shell around his heart. But the tether remained firm, reminding him, "Observe. Report. Betray." He was quickly recognized. A young, inexperienced sentry shouted his name, and within moments, a crowd of soldiers had gathered, faces a mixture of shock, relief, and grim sorrow. They had presumed Captain Varrus dead at the Shadow Citadel. Pushing through the throng, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, was Sergeant Elara. She was Kaelen's shadow, his most trusted battle partner, a woman as fiercely dedicated to duty as he had been. Her eyes, bright, honest emerald green, were the first true link to his past self, and the sight of her caused the strongest jolt of internal rebellion he had felt since his capture. "Kaelen!" Elara cried, rushing forward and throwing her arms around him in a tight, desperate embrace. "By the light, we thought you were gone. We searched for days after the collapse." Kaelen forced himself to return the embrace, a shallow, wooden gesture. The scent of her uniform, the warmth of her human presence, felt like a jarring error in the cold, precise machinery of his new existence. He had to remind himself, she is a target if she becomes an obstacle. "Elara," he replied, his voice rough, intentionally conveying exhaustion and trauma. "We were separated. I managed to slip out through the lower tunnels. I saw things, terrible things." He spun a practiced tale of survival, hiding in the rubble, rationing water, witnessing the horrifying rituals of the night court, a tale Lyra had anticipated and helped him perfect, feeding the narrative of the brave survivor back into the kingdom's fear. Elara pulled back, her hands gripping his shoulders, searching his face. "What happened to the others? Did you see the queen?" "The others, they fell," Kaelen said, letting his eyes take on a haunted, distant look. He didn't lie about their fate, just his involvement. "And yes, I saw her. Lyra Aethelred. She is, exactly as the legends say, a demon." She held the Citadel's power in her hand. He successfully played the traumatized soldier for the officers, providing fragmented, fear-ridden details. The information he gave was mostly accurate, details about the Citadel's internal layout, its weak supply routes, but interspersed with subtle, poisonous inaccuracies Lyra needed planted, like the location of a decoy weapon cache and the exaggerated strength of a phantom detachment. The High General, an aging man named Theron, received Kaelen with overwhelming relief. "Captain Varrus, you are a miracle. Your survival is a sign. We need your strength now more than ever. Our counteroffensive is being planned. You'll be briefed tomorrow." Kaelen accepted the assignment, the mission officially underway. Later that evening, Elara found him alone, cleaning his old sword in the barracks. She sat beside him, the silence between them heavy. "You're different, Kaelen," she said quietly, her eyes full of concern. "You barely eat. You don't sleep. And you don't look at me the way you used to. It's like only the armor is back, not the man." Kaelen paused his cleaning, the steel reflecting the dim lamplight. "I'm a survivor, Elara. Not a hero. I was a prisoner in the heart of the Night Court for a week. That changes a man." She reached out and lightly touched the spot on his chest where the soul-tether pulsed, hidden beneath his shirt. "Did they hurt you? Did they mark you?" The innocent contact was almost unbearable. He had to fight the urge to flinch away, to push her out of his personal space. "Danger. Retreat." The internal warning from the tether was insistent. He slowly looked up at her, meeting her worried gaze. "They broke some part of me, Elara. But they couldn't break the part that remembers my duty." He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially, using her trust to cement his cover. "They are planning a move on the Western Pass. They believe we've shifted our main forces east. That's the real reason I risked the tunnels. I need to get this to the general before morning." It was a lie, a small, effective distortion of Lyra's actual plans, designed to misdirect the human defense. Elara's eyes lit up with renewed purpose. "The Western Pass? We have to tell General Theron now." "No," Kaelen held up a hand. "The general is exhausted. I need to be sure. Help me. We used to scour maps for hours. We need to check every possibility before we raise the alarm. Meet me in the map room in an hour. Alone. I don't want to panic the troops." Elara nodded, her professional, soldier self overriding her personal concern. "An hour. I'll be there." As she walked away, Kaelen felt a cold wave of self-loathing wash over him, immediately crushed by the overwhelming surge of Lyra's satisfaction traveling through the bond. "Clever, Captain. Use the attachment. They will trust you implicitly." He knew what would happen in the map room. He wouldn't be sharing intelligence. He would be extracting the location of General Theron's new command center and the coordinates of the counteroffensive leader, the information Lyra truly desired. And if Elara hesitated, if she saw through his facade, the soldier Kaelen Varrus would have to follow the Queen's final command, eliminate the obstacle. He was home, and the betrayal had only just begun. The map room was cloaked in the shadows of the late night, lit only by a single oil lamp on the central table, casting long dancing shadows over the detailed tactical maps of Aerthos and Solari. Kaelen was there first, not studying the lines of defense, but tracing the invisible, agonizing line of the soul-tether connecting him back to the Night Court. He felt exposed, vulnerable in the stillness, the heavy weight of his imminent betrayal settling over him like a shroud. Elara arrived exactly on time, carrying a roll of fresh parchment and a look of professional intensity. She laid out her findings, pointing to the key defensive positions near the borders. "General Theron's plan is simple. Fortify the east and use the mountains as a natural defense," Elara explained, her finger tracing a winding path. "But if the vampires are aiming for the Western Pass, we'd be exposed. We need to know who is leading our counterattack, the one holding the reserves." "Who is the general of the reserves?" Kaelen asked, his voice flat, trying to sound like a man seeking tactical clarity, not espionage data. Elara hesitated, looking around the empty room before leaning closer. "It's classified, Kaelen. Only Theron and the king know the full deployment. But the commander is Lord Commander Alaric. He's setting up his temporary command center here." She pointed to a location deep within the mountains, a small, heavily fortified former monastery, its coordinates meticulously marked. "Lord Commander Alaric. Command center coordinates, check." Lyra's requirement was fulfilled. The Queen would now have the precise location of the key military leader. A wave of cold, possessive triumph washed through Kaelen from the bond. "Thank you, Elara," Kaelen murmured, the mission complete, the betrayal sealed. He moved to roll up the maps, his task finished. But Elara wasn't finished. She laid her hand over the map, stopping him. Her gaze softened, replacing the soldier with the friend. Kaelen, forget the Western past for a second. Look at me. He hesitated, then met her eyes. When you were missing, she continued, her voice thick with emotion, I prayed you were dead. Because if you were alive, I knew what they might do to a man like you. Honorable to a fault. And now that you're back, you're a shell. You flinched when I touched you. You haven't mentioned your family. You're giving me excellent tactical data, but your eyes are dead, Kaelen. She reached out and placed both hands on his face, forcing him to keep looking at her. I know Lyra Aethelred. She doesn't just kill, she corrupts. Tell me, Kaelen. Are you here as a survivor or as her weapon? The accusation struck him like a physical blow. The internal defenses of the soul-tether flared up instantly, a blinding, white-hot pain shooting through his chest. Threat detected. Eliminate. Lyra's distant, silent command screamed in his mind. She knows. Silence her. No. Kaelen's body moved with frightening, cold efficiency, fueled by the enhanced strength Lyra had granted him. His left hand shot up, grabbing Elara's wrist with crushing force, yanking her hands from his face. His right hand went to his belt, where he carried a dagger he had retrieved from the armory. Elara gasped, her eyes widening in pure horror as she realized the truth. Kaelen. What are you? Before she could finish, Kaelen had the knife out, its tip aimed straight at her heart. But as he lunged, a desperate, unexpected wave of his own buried humanity surged forth. It wasn't enough to break the tether, but it was enough to cause a fraction of a second's hesitation. That fraction was all Elara needed. She was a sergeant in the Royal Guard, not easily overcome. She twisted violently, using Kaelen's own momentum against him, and the dagger only grazed her shoulder, slicing through the thick fabric of her uniform. She didn't fight him, the Queen's weapon. She fought the man who had just betrayed her. She brought her boot up, kicking him sharply in the knee. The move jarred Kaelen, the pain barely registering due to the enhancement, but it broke his concentration. Elara scrambled back, knocking the lamp off the table. The room plunged into absolute darkness, save for a few dying flickers of flame on the spilled oil. They took him. Elara's voice, now a command, echoed in the blackness. The captain is compromised. Sound the alarm. He's a vampire spy. She wasn't running, she was creating a distraction, buying time to warn the others. Kaelen felt Lyra's fury through the bond, a roaring mental thunder. You hesitate. You fail. You let the asset escape. He lunged through the darkness, relying on the sharpened hearing and almost supernatural precision granted by his corrupted soul. He cornered her near a heavy iron cabinet. Elara didn't have her sword, but she grabbed a long, sharp ruler used for marking coordinates and lashed out desperately. Kaelen easily deflected the feeble weapon and gripped her neck, his enhanced strength making the human bone feel like brittle straw. He lifted her off the ground, her feet dangling. Don't fight it, Elara, he whispered, his own voice sounding alien and hollow. It's already done. Just as he prepared to snap her neck, the heavy wooden door to the map room burst open, letting in a flood of torchlight and the immediate concerned shouts of the arriving guards. Halt. Drop your weapon. Kaelen knew he had lost his chance. Killing Elara now meant certain death for him before he could escape, and the coordinates were already secure in his mind. He threw Elara violently against the iron cabinet. She crumpled, stunned but alive. He hurled the dagger towards the nearest torch, extinguishing it and creating a momentary flash of darkness. Using the confusion, Kaelen moved like a phantom, vaulting the central table and kicking out the remaining lamp. He was out the window and over the wall before the guards could even fully enter the room, leaving behind only the echo of his betrayal and the gasping, terrified form of the only friend he had left. The flight was agonizing. Every pounding footstep was a flight not from the Aerthos guards, but from the searing disappointment and silent wrath radiating from his queen. He had succeeded in the mission, the coordinates were his, but he had failed the crucial command, kill the obstacle. As he plunged back into the dark forests leading towards Solari, Kaelen knew two things. He was now a sworn enemy of the human world, a title he had earned with his own hands. And the punishment awaiting him in the night court would be infinitely worse than anything the human army could conceive. Kaelen arrived back at the night court in the pre-dawn hours, slipping past the eternal sentries like a piece of shadow returning home. He did not seek rest, he went straight to the throne room. He knew avoidance was impossible and defiance was an invitation to agony. The coordinates of Lord Commander Alaric were safe, secured in Lyra's mind through the tether, but the failure to silence Elara weighed heavier than any physical burden. Queen Lyra Aethelred was waiting. She sat upon her obsidian throne, not in the regal armor or winged display of power, but in a simple flowing black gown, which somehow made her look infinitely more dangerous. Lord Valerius stood a discreet distance to her right, his expression a thin mask of neutrality that barely concealed his eager anticipation. Kaelen knelt immediately, his head bowed, the posture of submission absolute. He did not need to speak. The Queen had already extracted the intelligence and the full playback of the map room encounter directly from his consciousness. "Rise, Captain," Lyra commanded, her voice dangerously calm, devoid of the seductive silkiness she usually employed. Kaelen rose slowly, his heart, the phantom part of him that could still feel, pounding against his ribs. "You successfully retrieved the location of the enemy's reserves," Lyra stated, her crimson eyes cold and piercing. "A necessary piece of information. For this you will be rewarded. However, you were given a secondary, equally vital command. Eliminate the witness." Valyrius stepped forward slightly, unable to contain his venom. "The human Elara. She now knows the depth of your infiltration, my queen. A failure of basic execution. The captain's sentimentality is leaking through." Lyra ignored Valyrius, focusing entirely on Kaelen. "Tell me, Kaelen, why did the execution fail? Your body was enhanced, your weapon ready. Did you find the preservation of that small, insignificant life more important than the successful completion of your mission?" Kaelen spoke the truth, which was the only safe course, the tether demanding honesty. "The memories of my former allegiance created a moment of hesitation, my queen. The residual loyalty interfered with the command sequence. I was unable to override the human impulse in time." A slow, terrifying smile spread across Lyra's face. "Residual loyalty. A small piece of your soul fragment is proving troublesome. We cannot have such weaknesses, Captain. Weakness is a liability that compromises the entirety of Solari." She extended her hand towards him, her fingertips glowing faintly with a dark, purplish light that matched the energy he remembered being torn from his chest. "You will be rewarded for the success," Lyra said, "and disciplined for the failure. The soul tether is not merely a chain, Kaelen, it is a tool for refinement." Valyrius chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "The refining of the human spirit. An exquisite performance." Lyra's power surged. Kaelen felt a crushing, invisible force descend upon him, not outside but inside his mind. She wasn't just tightening the tether, she was surgically cauterizing the fragment of emotion that had led to his hesitation. The pain was immediate and absolute, worse than any physical torture. It felt like his mind was being scrubbed clean with acid, specifically targeting the core of his affection for Elara, his sense of guilt, and his memories of the oath. He fell to his knees, biting back a scream, his hands gripping the cold stone floor until his knuckles cracked. He could feel the memories of Elara, her smile, her courage, their shared history, being violently ripped out and incinerated, leaving behind only the cold, factual knowledge of her existence. He was conscious through the entire, agonizing process. The assault lasted only moments, but Kaelen felt hours older when it ended. Lyra retracted her energy, and the paralyzing pain dissolved, replaced by a profound, cold emptiness. "Do you understand your mistake, Captain?" Lyra asked softly. Kaelen pushed himself back up, swaying slightly, but forcing himself to meet her gaze. The terror was gone, replaced by chilling, blank submission. "My hesitation was a flaw, my queen," Kaelen stated, his voice flat and perfectly controlled. "The risk to the mission was unacceptable. I have no attachment remaining to the human called Elara. She is an enemy asset." Lyra nodded, satisfied. "Good. The fragment has been neutralized. Now the reward. Lord Commander Alaric's coordinates mean the human resistance will be crippled. You have secured the safety of the Shadow Citadel for a generation." With a sudden, quick movement, she was off the throne and standing directly in front of him. She reached up and placed a single cool kiss directly on his forehead, right above the remnants of his old scar. "You are a precious acquisition, Kaelen. Do not test my patience again. Your purpose is not survival, it is perfection." Valyrius watched the intimate gesture with unconcealed rage, his eyes narrowed. He bowed stiffly. "If the captain has been adequately refined, my queen, I trust he understands his place, and will not be permitted to compromise future operations." "He understands," Lyra affirmed, stepping back. "And to ensure his loyalty is both absolute and public, Kaelen will now assist you, Valyrius, in planning the next phase of the counteroffensive." Valyrius's eyes flashed with surprise, then a wicked delight. "My queen, you are generous. I welcome the captain's assistance." He bowed deeply to Lyra, his gaze flicking to Kaelen with a clear message. "You are mine now, and I will find your next weakness." Kaelen felt no fear, only the cold directive to obey. He was now placed directly under the authority of the vampire who despised him most. His position as the queen's pet was over. He was now a tool to be used and perhaps destroyed by her most ambitious servant. Your duties begin immediately, Kaelen. Report to Lord Valerius in the crypt library, Lyra commanded. Go. Kaelen bowed low. Yes, my queen. He turned and followed Valerius out of the throne room, walking straight into the waiting trap of the ambitious elder vampire. His existence was now a terrifying balance between Lyra's cold favor and Valerius's burning resentment. The crypt library was less a room for books and more a vault of forbidden knowledge. It was carved deep beneath the foundation of the citadel, smelling of parchment, cold earth, and the faint, coppery scent of ancient blood. Lord Valerius stood before a massive stone table overlaid with arcane symbols, seemingly admiring a brittle, yellowed scroll. Kaelen entered, his posture that of a subordinate, a perfect imitation of a willing servant. The soul-tether was stable, providing only a cold sense of preparedness. The queen is too sentimental, Valerius stated without looking up, his voice dripping with condescension. She claims your soul fragment, yet she allows you to retain your memories of basic strategy. She insists on treating you like a general, when you are nothing more than a glorified hound. Kaelen remained silent, standing at attention. He knew a direct response would only invite more scorn, and he was still under Lyra's implicit command to follow Valerius's orders. Valerius finally turned, his face a mask of predatory malice. Your mission was successful only because of your humanity, Captain Varrus. That creature, Elara, trusted you because you smelled of loyalty. That same loyalty is why you let her live, creating a new, immediate threat to the queen. The weakness has been purged, Lord Valerius, Kaelen stated, the words utterly emotionless. The mission is paramount. Words, Captain. I require assurance, Valerius scoffed. He moved with sudden, startling speed, not drawing a blade, but placing his hand squarely on Kaelen's chest, directly over the scar of the soul-tether. The pressure was intense, a testing touch, seeking any flicker of defiance. Lyra may have cauterized your sentimentality, but I wonder if the core of a soldier's pride still remains, Valerius whispered, his breath cold against Kaelen's ear. Tell me, in your heart of hearts, do you not resent the queen for reducing a decorated captain of Aerthos to this silken toy? Kaelen felt the internal struggle. The residue of his soldier's pride fought hard against the tether's control, attempting to scream yes. I hate her. But the tether, reinforced by Lyra's recent discipline, held firm. It suppressed the emotion but left the words free to deliver the absolute, icy truth. The queen provided the purpose I lacked, Kaelen responded, his voice steady. My allegiance to Aerthos was a fragile thing of mere decades. My service to Queen Lyra is bound by eternity. Resentment is irrelevant. Valerius's eyes narrowed, his frustration palpable. He removed his hand, his initial attempt to provoke rebellion a clear failure. Such absolute submission. It's almost sickening. But fine. You are a tool and tools must be used. Valerius unfurled the ancient scroll he was holding. It was a detailed map of the mountain range separating Solari from Aerthos. The queen intends to leverage your intelligence immediately. Lord Commander Alaric's position is an excellent choke point. My plan is simple. While the human forces scramble to defend the western pass, the decoy location you fed them, we will strike Alaric's position directly. He traced a thin, jagged line through the mountains. We need a diversion. A small, elite strike force to cross this forgotten ridge. They will plant the Queen's mark in the human supply caches near the capital, forcing General Theron to recall his main troops for internal defense. This will leave Alaric exposed. Valerius looked Kaelen up and down with contempt. This mission requires the subtle touch of a human, and the speed of a low-ranking ghoul. I cannot spare an elder vampire for such triviality. You, Captain, are expendable yet useful. You will lead the diversionary force, Valerius commanded. Take 3 of my best shadows, the Queen's most efficient assassins. You will penetrate Aerthos territory, cause enough destruction to create panic, and return before Alaric's base is compromised. Kaelen felt a cold flicker of recognition. Valerius was not giving him a mission, he was giving him a death sentence. The Forgotten Ridge was a known viper's nest of mountain beasts and ancient, unpredictable wards left by the earliest human kings. Leading a small unit through it was a near-suicidal task, perfectly designed to dispose of the Queen's pet, without directly disobeying her. Understood, Lord Valerius, Kaelen replied instantly, accepting the impossible. The tether allowed no room for self-preservation. What is the specific target for the Queen's mark? Valerius smiled, a genuine malicious flash of fangs. Not a generic supply post, Captain. To maximize the panic, you will target the royal armory, deep within the capital, near the king's own fortress. An inside job, to sow distrust among the human high command. If you succeed, you will have redeemed your earlier failure. He paused, letting the full weight of the assignment settle. If you fail, if you are captured or killed, it will simply prove to the Queen that your human weakness was terminal. Either way, Captain Varrus, this mission guarantees the success of Solari's offensive. Now go. Gather the shadows. You depart at sunset. Kaelen bowed and turned to leave. Just as he reached the heavy iron door, Valyrius's cold voice stopped him. And Captain, do be careful. I would hate for the Queen's new toy to break before I've had a chance to truly play with it. Kaelen walked out of the crypt library, not as a defiant hero seeking escape, but as a compromised machine preparing for its next, most dangerous task. He was being used as bait by Valyrius and controlled by Lyra, and his destination was a guaranteed killing field, the royal armory, the very heart of the kingdom he was sworn to protect. He was going back to Aerthos, this time as a fully operational, unwilling saboteur. The sun bled into the horizon, casting the forgotten ridge in hues of grim purple and shadow when Kaelen and his small unit began their ascent. His unit consisted of 3 shadows, lower-ranking vampires renowned for their speed and single-minded obedience to Valyrius. They were silent, wraith-like figures wrapped in reinforced leather, their eyes glowing with a cold, pale yellow light that marked them as Valyrius's personal servants. They held Kaelen in utter contempt, seeing him as the weak, breathing flesh they had to tolerate. Kaelen led the ascent, navigating the treacherous, unmarked paths with the precision of a born mountaineer, a skill his human body retained. The shadows, though faster, were ill-suited for the complex, uneven terrain. "Hurry, human," one of the shadows, named Rexus, hissed from behind, his voice a dry rasp. "We waste precious hours for your slow pace." Kaelen didn't pause. "The ridge is ancient, Rexus. The human kings placed warding sigils along this path. Move too fast and you'll trigger arcane traps meant to shatter the non-human. We move on my pace or we die before we see the capital." The certainty in his voice silenced the vampire. Lyra's enhancement had given Kaelen a chillingly clear perception of arcane energy, a new vital sense. As they climbed higher, Kaelen identified several of the invisible wards, faint shimmers in the air humming with barely contained power. He directed the shadows around them, using his own body to test the boundaries, knowing that even if a ward touched him, the combined strength of Lyra's tether and his human resistance might allow him to survive a blow that would instantly atomize the fragile shadows. He moved with a grim detachment, his mind solely focused on the mission's parameters. Infiltrate royal armory, plant the Queen's mark, escape. The thought of the mission being a suicide trap set by Valyrius was a cold fact, not a deterrent. If he died fulfilling Lyra's objective, it was merely the expected conclusion of his new life. 3 days of relentless travel brought them to the edge of the mountains, overlooking the vast plain leading to the capital of Aerthos. The sight of the city's familiar walls, even from this distance, was a shock. It was the place he had sworn to protect, the place he was now preparing to burn from the inside. The capital's patrols will be heavy and chaotic, thanks to the news of the Citadel, Kaelen informed the shadows, pointing to the winding river that led directly toward the armory district. "We follow the river's edge under the cover of the mist that rises at dusk. I enter the armory. You create the distraction." "Distraction?" Rexus sneered. "We are assassins, not firecrackers. We kill the guards and you enter." "No," Kaelen countered, his gaze firm. "The goal is panic and recall, not a skirmish. You will strike the king's personal barracks, cause a massive, loud disruption, but ensure you leave witnesses. The capital must believe the threat is internal and widespread." He handed Rexus a small, obsidian shard carved with Lyra's intricate sigil. "This is the mark. Embed it deeply into the most valuable weapon you find. It must be found quickly by the human authorities." Rexus and the shadows bowed their heads in reluctant acceptance. Kaelen's soldierly ruthlessness, even if serving the enemy, earned a grudging respect. Under the deep cover of a fog-laden night, Kaelen scaled the inner wall of the armory district. He moved like a shadow himself, his senses heightened, his steps silent. The memory of the physical training he had once supervised in this very compound served him well. He found the main vault, where the most valuable enchanted weapons were kept. As he was preparing to breach the door, a sudden, sharp, almost familiar presence registered nearby. It was a high-ranking officer. Kaelen pressed himself flat against the cold stone, holding his breath, waiting for the officer to pass. The footsteps stopped right in front of the vault door. "You really think you could hide from me, Kaelen?" A cold, low voice commanded. It was Sergeant Elara. She stepped out of the fog, her shoulder bandaged, her eyes not panicked, but blazing with calculated, cold rage. She had bypassed the patrols, tracking him not as a general would, but as a hunter tracks prey, anticipating his logical military target. She held her familiar, short broadsword, and its tip was aimed directly at Kaelen's heart. "You betrayed us," Elara spat, her voice tight with pain and absolute resolution. "You betrayed me. But I knew you'd come back for the final blow. You are still a creature of duty, Kaelen, even if that duty is corrupted. I was waiting for you here." She was here to kill him, not capture him. She was the one obstacle Kaelen had failed to remove, and now she was back to complete the soldier's original, broken oath. Kaelen felt a terrifying internal conflict. The tether commanded him to strike her down without hesitation, while the ghost of the man who loved her screamed a silent warning. This was the true test of Lyra's discipline, and the battlefield was his own corrupted soul. The air in the narrow alleyway near the Royal Armory vault crackled with tension, thick enough to choke on. The faint sounds of the capital, distant shouts, the clatter of a guard patrol, were muffled by the fog, creating a private stage for this brutal reunion. Elara didn't move from her defensive stance, her sword pointed unwaveringly at Kaelen's chest. Her eyes were not those of the comrade he knew, but of a heartbroken soldier ready to execute a traitor. "Don't take another step, Kaelen," she warned, her voice steady despite the raw pain in her expression. "I saw what they did to you in the map room. I know you're not entirely yourself, but the hand that holds that dagger is still yours. I won't let you hurt this city." Kaelen felt a terrifying internal silence. The moment of hesitation he'd suffered earlier was gone, purged by Lyra's brutal discipline. The soul tether pulsed, cold and absolute, overriding the residual guilt. Elara was an obstacle, a threat, a liability. Nothing more. "I am under command," Kaelen responded, his voice flat, devoid of the familiar warmth Elara remembered. "Your presence compromises the objective. Step aside. Your command is treason." Elara lunged suddenly, not with a killing blow, but a strategic feint, aiming to disarm him. Kaelen moved with the unnerving speed of his enhanced body. He dodged the blade by a whisper, the steel passing where his heart had been a moment before. He countered instantly, not using the dagger but driving his shoulder hard into Elara's center mass. The enhanced, inhuman force of the blow was devastating. Elara gasped, the breath driven from her lungs, and she stumbled back, her sword clattering against the stone wall. Before she could recover, Kaelen grabbed her, spinning her around and slamming her back against the vault door. He held her immobilized with one powerful arm, the dagger raised high in his other hand. "This is the end, Elara," he stated, the words chillingly rehearsed. "You should have died in the Citadel." Just as he brought the dagger down, Elara fought back with the desperation of a cornered lioness. She twisted her neck and bit down hard on Kaelen's forearm, the pain tearing through the numbness the tether usually provided. The surprise and the flash of pain were just enough to break Kaelen's focus for the second time. The dagger missed her heart, instead plunging deep into the heavy leather of her shoulder pad, pinning her against the door. Elara screamed, a raw, choked sound that echoed the scream of the soldier Kaelen Varrus who was dying inside him. The physical act of wounding her, even accidentally missing the killing blow, sent a wave of profound internal panic back to the Night Court. "Failure. I told you to eliminate the threat." Lyra's mental voice screamed through the tether, a roaring, absolute fury that felt like his skull was splitting in two. The pain was so intense that Kaelen momentarily staggered, leaning heavily on the vault door, his vision tunneling. Elara, despite the searing agony of the dagger pinning her, saw her chance. She was not fighting Kaelen, she was fighting Lyra's control. "You're fighting it, Kaelen." She choked out, her face pale. "I see it. That monster is tearing you apart. Fight her. Remember your mother. Remember the oath." The words were precisely the triggers Lyra had attempted to purge. The pain from the Queen's mental assault intensified, punishing the weakness Elara was exploiting. Kaelen needed to complete the mission now before the mental onslaught crippled him completely. He pulled the dagger out of her shoulder with a sharp, sickening jerk, ignoring Elara's tortured cry. He shoved her away and she collapsed, clutching her bleeding wound, too hurt to move. He turned to the vault, his mind locking onto the single remaining command: mission. He slammed a modified crowbar into the seam of the heavy iron door, using his enhanced strength to tear the lock mechanism free. As the vault creaked open, Kaelen heard the distant, muffled sound of chaos from the barracks district. The shadows had begun their diversionary attack. He had mere minutes. He entered the vault, snatching up the most ornate and recognizable weapon, a ceremonial battle-axe meant for the king's bodyguard. He quickly planted the queen's mark deep into the metal, ensuring it would be discovered and immediately recognized as Lyra's signature. As he turned to leave, his task complete, he looked back at the wounded figure of Elara slumped by the door. She looked utterly defeated, unable to stop him. He knew he had to kill her. If he didn't, Lyra's subsequent punishment would erase what little was left of his true self. Kaelen walked slowly towards her, his dagger held ready, the chilling control of the tether forcing his hand. He knelt, preparing for the final devastating act of betrayal. Just as the dagger's tip touched Elara's throat, a frantic, desperate thought pierced Kaelen's mind, not his own, but a sudden, panic projection from Lyra. "Kaelen, stop. Retreat immediately. Valyrius is moving his force too soon. You are exposed." The command was absolute and urgent, a survival directive that instantly overruled the eliminate obstacle order. Lyra needed Kaelen alive for the next phase, and Valyrius's impatience had endangered him. Kaelen instantly retracted the blade. He looked into Elara's eyes, which were wide with expectation of death, and saw not an enemy, but the ghost of his love. He did not speak. He merely rose, turning his back on her, and vanished into the heavy fog of the capital, leaving Elara alive, betrayed, and now possessing the knowledge of his deep, agonizing compromise. He had failed to kill her, but he had successfully sabotaged the kingdom. Now he had to survive Valyrius's machinations and Lyra's sudden panic. Kaelen's return journey was a blur of frantic speed, fueled by Lyra's urgent, terrified mental command. He didn't stop until he reached the outer perimeter of the night court, where he collapsed, utterly spent. The shadows he commanded returned a few hours later, triumphant and bloodied, having successfully created panic in the human capital. They had lost one of their number but had planted the queen's mark, achieving the objective of panic and recall. Kaelen went straight to Lyra's private chambers, bypassing the throne room entirely. This was a crisis, not a ceremonial review. He found Lyra not on her throne, but pacing before a vast, detailed military map of the Aerthos border, her usual calm shattered. Her winged shadow seemed agitated, reflecting the internal turmoil Kaelen felt through the bond. The coordinates. The armory mark. It was successful, my queen, Kaelen reported, kneeling on one knee, his human fatigue in obvious contrast to her immortal energy. Lyra did not acknowledge the success. She whirled on him, her red eyes burning with a mixture of fury and calculated fear. "You almost died, Kaelen. Not by the human's hand, but by Valyrius's betrayal," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "He launched the main strike force an entire day too early. They are moving towards Alaric's position now, before the human distraction has had time to take effect." Lyra's sudden panic resonated through the tether, giving Kaelen insight into the true strategic flaw. Valyrius hadn't just used Kaelen as bait. He had compromised the entire invasion timeline. "The distraction I commanded was to sow internal chaos and force the Aerthos king to recall his reserves," Lyra explained, running a frustrated hand through her dark hair. "Valyrius launched the attack knowing the distraction wouldn't be effective yet. He is attempting to force a pitched battle against a fortified position." "Why, my queen?" Kaelen asked, the question forced by the logic Lyra valued. "Because a quick, glorious victory makes Valyrius a hero and makes me dependent on his brute strength," Lyra revealed, her face contorted in a rare display of vulnerability. "If the main force wins quickly, he gains power, overshadows me and can challenge my claim to the throne. If they fail, he can blame my unconventional tactics, namely your involvement." Lyra walked up to Kaelen, her gaze possessive and intense. "Valyrius doesn't want the long, careful campaign I planned. He wants to be the conqueror. He jeopardized your life and my entire strategy to advance his own position." "And the Shadow Unit's success?" Kaelen questioned. "The mark was planted. The panic will begin soon." "Too late," Lyra countered, shaking her head. "Valyrius's army will reach Alaric's command post by dawn. The human king will only realize the internal threat after his field commander has been slaughtered." She took Kaelen's face in her hands, her touch ice-cold but now lacking the predatory quality, replaced by a fierce, calculating need. "I need you, Kaelen. Your soldier's mind. Your loyalty is now my only absolute guarantee against Valyrius's treachery." Lyra tightened the tether, not with pain, but with an overwhelming surge of trust and purpose. This was the greatest reward, not submission but being made essential. "I have retrieved the coordinates of Valyrius's forward command post," Lyra revealed. His command unit is small, expecting no resistance. If we can incapacitate Valyrius before he issues the final, unstoppable charge, I can retake command of the main army and recall them before they suffer catastrophic losses. What is the command, my queen? Kaelen asked, his soldier instincts finally aligning with a true mission, saving Lyra's command, which now felt like his own duty. Lyra's lips curved into a cold, determined smile, one that promised both strategy and destruction. The human who refused to die for the king will now save the Vampire Queen from her own blood. Kaelen, you will assassinate Lord Valerius. The command was absolute, shocking Kaelen to his core. He had been sent to kill a soldier, and now he was being sent to kill an elder vampire, the queen's own trusted general. He is an elder, my queen. His strength is formidable, and his mind is shielded, Kaelen cautioned, his strategic assessment overriding his obedience. Precisely why you must not face him with a blade, Lyra stated. You will use the weapon I gave you, the one he failed to see. She walked to her vanity and picked up a delicate, dark silver vial, no bigger than a finger. It contained a slow, bubbling liquid that shimmered with sickly green light. This is the ashen draft. The poison of the night court, Lyra explained. It does not kill elders. It paralyzes them, separating the mind from the body long enough for me to reclaim his allegiance. She placed the vial in Kaelen's hands. You are not going to fight him, Kaelen. You are going to serve him. Use your human frailty, your feigned obedience, and your new position under his command to get close enough to put this in his chalice. Do this, and you will not only save my throne, but you will also secure your position as my true consort, unchallenged by the treachery of my court. Kaelen closed his hand around the vial. He was now a highly placed assassin, tasked with eliminating the second most powerful figure in Solari. He had successfully betrayed his own kind, and now he was being ordered to betray the monster who hated him most. The game of survival had turned into a deadly dance for the queen's favor. Lord Valerius's forward command post was not a castle, but a massive, reinforced tent complex pitched in a ravine deep within Solari territory, close to the mountain pass leading to Lord Commander Alaric's position. The air crackled with the urgency of impending battle. Kaelen arrived just as the twilight was descending, cloaked and moving with the grim purpose of a sanctioned assassin. He was immediately directed to Valyrius's tent, where the elder vampire was overseeing the final deployment maps. Valyrius looked up, a cruel, triumphant smirk on his face. He clearly assumed Kaelen was back to report his successful demise in the human capital. Ah, the captain returns. Against all odds, you cling to life, Valyrius drawled, waving a dismissal at the other vampires present. Tell me, Varrus, did you enjoy your little suicide run? Or did you finally realize the true meaning of expendable? Kaelen knelt on one knee, maintaining the facade of absolute submission. The mission was completed, Lord Valerius. The mark was planted. The capital will recall its reserves. Excellent. Then your weakness in sparing that human sergeant was, for once, justified, Valerius conceded, though his eyes were sharp, searching for any sign of defiance. Now stand. We are about to toast the imminent fall of Aerthos's finest commander. Valerius poured a dark red, thick liquid, a potent vampire wine, into 2 ornate, silver chalices. He pushed one toward Kaelen. Drink, Captain, Valerius commanded, his smile widening. A toast to the coming victory, and to the predictable demise of the queen's foolish caution. This was the moment. The tether, already buzzing with Lyra's focused intent, tightened. The command was clear: execute. Kaelen took the chalice, his hand steady. He was not required to drink, only to hold it. Valerius, eager to gloat and dismiss the human, was already lifting his own cup. To my ascension, Valerius stated, his voice ringing with arrogance. As Valerius's chalice reached his lips, Kaelen moved. Not by leaping or attacking, but by simulating a human soldier's clumsiness. He suddenly swayed, stumbling slightly, and knocked his own chalice over the table. The dark wine splashed harmlessly onto the map. Apologies, Lord Valerius. Kaelen exclaimed, injecting just enough genuine panic into his voice to sound human and subordinate. He immediately grabbed a nearby rag to wipe the spilled wine, bending close to the table. In that split second, concealed by the motion and the distraction, Kaelen withdrew the tiny silver vial of ashen draft. With the speed granted by his enhancement, he uncorked it with his thumb and poured the entire shimmering green liquid into Valerius's untouched chalice. Valerius roared, his attention diverted from his cup to the ruined map. Incompetent fool. Watch where you step, Varrus. That map took days to chart. My deepest apologies, my lord, Kaelen repeated, standing straight, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "Allow me to refill your cup." Valyrius, his fury overriding his paranoia, merely snatched his chalice back. "No. I shall have my toast, map or no map. Leave the refilling to a proper servant." He raised the poisoned chalice again, the ashen draught having instantly dissolved into the thick wine, turning the color a darker, more ominous shade of crimson. "To conquest," Valyrius declared, and without another thought, he drained the cup in one long, satisfied gulp. Kaelen stood absolutely still, the terror and the triumph battling for control. The tether was vibrating wildly, transmitting Lyra's focused anticipation. Valyrius set the empty chalice down with a loud clang, a look of sublime victory on his face. Then the poison hit. It wasn't a sudden collapse. The effect was insidious. Valyrius's eyes, initially bright with victory, glazed over. His triumphant smirk froze, slowly twisting into an expression of agonizing confusion. He raised a hand to his temple, swaying on his feet. "What is this?" Valyrius rasped, his voice sounding distant, disconnected. He looked down at Kaelen, his realization dawning but too late. "The Queen. You traitorous whelp." The ashen draught worked by violently separating the vampire's consciousness from their immortal body. Valyrius's mind was still fully aware, but his body was rapidly becoming unresponsive, a stone statue of rage. He stumbled, his powerful limbs refusing to obey the command to strike the soldier. He finally collapsed onto the tent floor with a heavy thud, fully conscious but completely paralyzed, his magnificent elder vampire body now entirely inert. "Excellent, Kaelen. You have done well. Your devotion is rewarded." Lyra's mental voice, thick with triumph, flooded Kaelen's mind. The tent flap opened and Queen Lyra Aethelred stepped in. She surveyed the scene, the inert form of Valyrius and the rigid, exhausted soldier. "The serpent has been dealt with," Lyra announced, walking calmly toward Valyrius's paralyzed body. She looked down at him, her face devoid of pity. "Your ambition was your undoing, Valyrius. You will not challenge my throne again." She turned to Kaelen, her expression softening into a possessive, admiring look. "You have faced my enemy and my treachery. You have killed the soldier and you have served the queen. From this day forward, Lord Valerius is nothing. Captain Kaelen Varrus is now my shadow general, second only to me." Lyra extended her hand to him. "Come, my consort. We have an army to recall, a kingdom to stabilize and a fragile human world to finally conquer. But first you need rest. Rest and the full reward of my trust." Kaelen took her hand. His promotion was complete, his life as a soldier irrevocably replaced by his role as the queen's unwilling general. The tether pulsed with satisfaction and dominance. He had survived the plot, but he had fully lost himself to the night court. The assassination of Lord Valerius sent a controlled yet powerful shockwave through the night court. While Lyra publicly maintained that Valerius had fallen defending the strategic push against Aerthos, the sudden elevation of the former human captive, Kaelen Varrus, to Shadow General was a clear and terrifying statement to the remaining elder vampires. The queen's power was absolute, and her newest consort was now her most trusted instrument. Kaelen's life underwent a final, irreversible transformation. His days were now spent in the war room, his military mind ruthlessly efficient in executing Lyra's carefully planned long-term conquest strategy. He organized supply lines, charted defensive wards, and deployed strike forces with a cold precision that surpassed even Valerius's former efforts. The soul-tether functioned seamlessly, ensuring that every strategic decision he made was perfectly aligned with Lyra's ultimate victory. He was a general in all but name, moving among the powerful immortal court with the silence and authority of a born ruler, albeit one bound by an invisible chain. Yet it was the nights that defined his new reality. Lyra made it clear that the reward for his service was not merely rank but access. Kaelen was given chambers adjacent to her own, a space of immense, dark luxury that was both his prison and his pedestal. One evening, Lyra summoned him after a particularly draining planning session. Kaelen entered her personal sanctuary, a room heavy with the scent of night jasmine and ancient, metallic wine. Lyra was reclining on a divan, her form draped in a robe of deep purple, her expression contemplative. "Come, Kaelen," she commanded, beckoning him closer. "The strategy is sound, the court is compliant. We have time now for reflection." Kaelen knelt beside her, a gesture that was now reflexive. "My queen, my purpose is served by your command. I require no reflection." Lyra smiled, a slow, predatory expression that still held a strange element of tragic beauty. "Ah, but I require it, my general. I claimed your soul not just for your soldier's mind, but because I saw a devotion in you that I haven't witnessed in centuries. Immortals are ambitious, predictable. You, my captain, are beautifully finite, yet infinitely devoted. She reached out and placed her cold hand on his chest, directly over the tether scar. She did not inflict pain, but instead sent a wave of deep, complex emotion through the bond. A feeling of ancient weariness, the weight of centuries of lonely rule, and a profound, possessive gratitude for his singular focus. Do you know why I allow you to live, Kaelen, when I could simply replace you? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Because you are the only one in this court whose obedience is not driven by fear, but by a necessity I created. You cannot betray me because I hold the very concept of your betrayal. She shifted, leaning closer, her eyes locking onto his. Tell me something, Kaelen. Without the tether, if you were still the captain of Aerthos, would you have killed me when you first had the chance? The question was a test, a deliberate probe into the dead space where his free will had once resided. The tether allowed the truth but purged the emotion. Yes, my queen, Kaelen responded instantly, his eyes blank yet honest. My duty to the king demanded your death. Lyra laughed, a short, dark sound of absolute power. Honesty. It is invigorating. But that loyalty is dead now. And in its place I am giving you something stronger than duty. She pulled him closer, her face inches from his. You are not just my general, Kaelen. You are my shadow consort. You represent the final, ultimate conquest of the human world, the complete devotion of their greatest strength to my service. You are the symbol of my new era. She finally brought her mouth to his, not in violence but in a long, cold kiss that was utterly dominating. Kaelen felt the power surge from her to him, a chilling blend of immortal energy and fierce possession, driving out any lingering vestige of his former self. He was hers, completely and irrevocably. Later, lying in the silence of his room, Kaelen stared at the high, vaulted ceiling. He was now Lyra's lover, her general, her most trusted asset. He possessed more power than any human in history, yet he had less control over his own existence than the lowliest ghoul in the night court. He had achieved absolute survival at the cost of absolute self. He was the perfect weapon, a perfect companion, and a perfect, tragic ruin. His new reality was sealed. The soldier was gone, replaced by the consort. But unknown to Kaelen and Lyra, the human world, specifically the one woman he had been ordered to kill, Elara, was far from finished with him. The capital of Aerthos was in turmoil. The queen's mark, Lyra's sigil carved into the king's ceremonial battle-axe, found deep within the royal armory, had shattered the human command structure. General Theron was scrambling to contain the panic, convinced that powerful vampire agents were embedded deep within the military hierarchy. The king, fearing a palace coup, had recalled vital reserve troops, precisely as Lyra had intended. The successful sabotage had given Solari the tactical edge they needed. Amidst this chaos, Sergeant Alara lay in the military hospital, recovering from the deep, ragged stab wound Kaelen had inflicted. Her physical wound was healing, but the betrayal was a gaping chasm in her soul. She had identified the traitor, but no one believed her fractured tale of Kaelen's compromise and his inhuman strength. They saw her as a traumatized survivor fabricating elaborate excuses for the failure to secure the armory. One evening, a week after the incident, Elara watched from her narrow window as General Theron's depleted troops marched out, heading east to guard the expected attack, leaving the mountain passes vulnerable. She knew they were marching into a trap designed by the mind she once trusted most. He didn't kill me, Elara thought, touching the scar on her shoulder. He could have. Twice. The Captain Varrus I knew hesitated. But the creature he is now? He pulled the blade back only because his queen gave him a higher priority. She realized Kaelen's failure to kill her wasn't a sign of lingering love. It was evidence that his true loyalty, the soul-tether, had simply shifted allegiance. He was a weapon, and weapons are only used when pointed at the right target. Elara knew she couldn't rely on the king or the general anymore. Her mission was no longer about defending Aerthos' strategy, it was personal, and it was about redemption. The only way to save her country was to sever the tie between the Vampire Queen and the military genius who served her. She waited until the dead of night, slipping out of the hospital in stolen clothes, carrying her repaired broadsword and a map. Her destination was clear. The Shadow Citadel, the captured fortress that was Kaelen's gateway into the Night Court. She sought out the one resource she knew she could trust, the Order of the Sunstone, a clandestine group of rogue mages and scholars dedicated to studying and defeating vampire magic. Their beliefs were considered heretical by the king, but Elara was desperate. She found their hidden sanctuary in the old city catacombs. An aging, wiry mage named Master Perrin listened patiently to her wild tale of soul tethers and forced obedience. "The Varrus you describe is a rare thing," Perrin murmured, running his hand over an ancient, glowing sunstone artifact. "A shadow consort. The queen has claimed his entire will, embedding a part of her own essence into his soul. His devotion is not a choice, it is an arcane absolute. Can it be broken?" Elara demanded, gripping her sword. "To break the bond is to risk shattering the soul itself," Perrin warned. "It requires a simultaneous infusion of light and a physical separation from the host. It is almost impossible. But we have a relic, the Blade of Astrea. It is forged from consecrated silver and absorbs life energy. If the blade cuts the host, it temporarily disrupts the arcane bond, leaving the queen exposed through the tether." Elara's resolve hardened. "Then I need that blade. I am going to the Shadow Citadel. He tried to kill me as his duty to her. I will free him or I will kill him as my duty to Aerthos." Perrin looked into her determined eyes and saw not a soldier seeking revenge, but a martyr seeking justice. He gave her the Blade of Astrea, a sword whose silver surface gleamed with an unsettling, pure light, its energy chilling to the touch. "You must not simply wound him, Elara," Perrin instructed gravely. "You must reach the heart of the Night Court, find the soul tether's root, which will be wherever Lyra keeps the core of her acquired energy, and strike both Kaelen and the tether's source simultaneously. Otherwise you will both die." Elara nodded, accepting the impossible odds. She was no longer just Sergeant Elara, she was the last hope of Aerthos, driven by a terrible love and an absolute need for vengeance. The path back to Kaelen led straight through the conquered citadel and into the Vampire Queen's heartland. Elara's journey back to the Shadow Citadel was the inverse of Kaelen's return to the capital. While Kaelen had moved with the enhanced speed and stealth of a puppet assassin, Elara moved with the desperate, burning resolve of a true soldier. She used old smuggler routes and hidden mountain trails, relying on her knowledge of the terrain and the thick, protective fog that often shrouded the valleys bordering Solari. The Blade of Astrea, sheathed across her back, felt impossibly heavy, yet its consecrated silver radiated a cold, steady purpose that was her only comfort. The Shadow Citadel, once a human outpost, was now the forward headquarters of the Night Court, crawling with low-ranking vampires, shadows and ghouls. It was a fortress of fear, its Gothic architecture now permanently stained with the atmosphere of the undead. Elara knew direct confrontation was suicide. She had to use her old familiarity with the Citadel's deep, forgotten infrastructure. She located the ancient maintenance tunnels, designed by the original human builders, that ran beneath the massive fortress walls, long since abandoned and filled with stagnant water and rubble. Clutching the hilt of the Blade of Astrea, Elara spent an agonizing day navigating the suffocating darkness. She moved through water, mud and ancient filth, fighting down waves of nausea and fear, only the image of Kaelen's dead eyes driving her forward. She finally breached the inner perimeter, emerging into the Citadel's sublevels, the vast dungeons and stores that served the Queen's forces. She hid in the shadows, listening to the guttural foreign language of the shadows, observing their movements. Her objective was simple: find the core of the Night Court's power within the Citadel. Master Perrin had insisted that the soul tether, though connected to Kaelen, must draw sustenance from a dedicated source, an arcane focal point near the Queen. Since Lyra was now largely based here, that focus must be close. Elara observed the pattern of the strongest, most disciplined vampire guards. They never patrolled the mundane storage areas. They guarded the deep crypts below the main structure, where the first elder vampires were buried, and where the most powerful arcane relics were usually housed. She tracked the guards' shifting patterns for hours, moving from shadow to shadow, until she found the heavy, unmarked iron door leading downwards. As she approached, she felt a profound change in the air, a humming, powerful energy that made the silver of the Blade of Astrea pulse with icy heat. This was it. She waited for a changing of the guard, using the distraction of the Citadel's clock chimes to slip past the sentries and pry open the heavy iron door just enough to slide through. The crypt was a vast, cold cavern dominated by a single, terrifying spectacle. In the center of the room, built upon an altar of black marble and surrounded by ancient, shimmering runes, was a large, crystal orb. The orb pulsed with a sickly, beautiful pink-purple energy, the very energy Elara had seen wrenched from Kaelen's chest during his capture. This was the tether focus, the physical receptacle holding the claimed essence of his soul. And standing before the orb, seemingly drawing power from its light, was Queen Lyra Aethelred herself, her back to Elara. She was not alone. Standing silently beside her, fully armored and completely focused, was Shadow General Kaelen Varrus. Lyra was giving Kaelen final instructions, her voice low and commanding. "The time is now, Kaelen. Your forces are ready. You will lead the final charge against the north gate of Aerthos," Lyra instructed, placing a hand possessively on Kaelen's armored arm. "The king will fall and you, my general, will be the one to present him to me. Go. Do not hesitate." Kaelen turned, his eyes hard, fully accepting the mission. He walked towards the crypt door, passing directly by Elara's hiding spot. He was so focused, so utterly enslaved to his purpose, that he did not even sense her presence. Elara realized with chilling clarity, she had run out of time. She couldn't wait for Kaelen to leave. If he marched on Aerthos, the capital would fall. Her mission had changed. It was no longer just about rescue. It was about stopping the general before he launched the final attack. As Kaelen reached the crypt entrance, Elara exploded from the shadows, the blade of Astrea ripping through the air with a silvery, consecrated flash. "Kaelen!" she roared, a mix of fury, grief, and desperation fueling her speed. The sudden sound shattered Kaelen's focus, and the ancient soldier's instincts flickered. He turned just as the blade of Astrea sliced into his shoulder, the silver burning through his new enhanced flesh. The pain was immediate, paralyzing, and unlike anything he had ever known. More importantly, the soul-tether screamed. The blade of Astrea, consecrated with light magic, had not just wounded him. It had temporarily severed the arcane connection to Lyra. For a terrifying, blessed instant, the Shadow General vanished, and the bewildered, horrified eyes of Captain Kaelen Varrus stared back at Alara. The crypt exploded into chaos. Kaelen stumbled, the blade of Astrea burning in his shoulder. The pain was secondary to the horrific sensation of the soul-tether snapping, not breaking entirely, but momentarily severing the direct, tyrannical link to Queen Lyra's consciousness. For the first time in weeks, his mind was his own. The memories flooded back. The map room, the betrayal of Elara, the murder of Valyrius, and the chilling realization of his own utter corruption. He looked at Alara, his former comrade and the author of his agonizing freedom. His eyes, briefly blessedly human, were wide with shock, horror, and a devastating surge of recognition. "Alara, run. Get out." Kaelen gasped, finding his voice, but the word for Lyra choked in his throat. But Lyra was already reacting. The moment the link was severed, the queen felt an unbearable physical pain, the sensation of a piece of her own essence being violently ripped away. She screamed, a sound of ancient raw fury that echoed off the crypt walls, and turned to face the threat. Her crimson eyes fell upon Elara, standing defiant with the glowing silver blade, and then to the tether focus, the crystal orb holding Kaelen's claimed soul essence, which was visibly flickering and dimming. "The sunstone's venom." Lyra shrieked, recognizing the consecrated magic of the blade. "You foolish human. You think you can steal what is mine?" Lyra launched herself forward, not at Elara, but at the injured Kaelen. Her goal was not to kill him, but to re-establish the bond before his mind could fully reassert its will. "You are mine, General," she roared, her fingers sprouting long claw-like nails aimed at his neck. Kaelen's soldier instincts, freed from the paralysis of the tether, screamed in survival mode. He dodged Lyra's desperate attack, his movement clumsy, weakened by the silver wound. "Now Alara. The orb," Kaelen yelled, pushing his pain aside, knowing her second strike must be decisive. Elara didn't hesitate. She knew she couldn't match Lyra in power, but the queen's focus was entirely on reclaiming Kaelen. Elara lunged past them both, ignoring Kaelen's injury and Lyra's rage. She didn't have time to consider the impossibility of the task. With a final desperate surge of consecrated energy, Elara swung the blade of Astrea not at Lyra, but at the shimmering tether focus on the black altar. The impact was cataclysmic. The silver blade hit the crystal orb, and the tether focus shattered with an ear-splitting explosion of dark pink arcane energy. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Kaelen, the release was agonizing. He collapsed, feeling the final full chunk of his soul snap back into his being, followed by the complete physical depletion of the Night Court's enhancements. He was just a man again, weak and severely wounded but free. 2. Lyra, she was thrown back by the blast, hitting the crypt wall with tremendous force. The complete destruction of the tether focus and the permanent loss of Kaelen's powerful soul inflicted a massive, non-lethal blow to her own immortal essence. She writhed on the floor, momentarily crippled and howling in unimaginable pain. The crypt door burst open, and a swarm of shadows and elite vampire guards rushed in, alerted by the blast and Lyra's scream. Guards! Protect the queen. Kill the human. A high-ranking vampire general commanded, pointing at Elara. Elara knew she had only seconds. She ran to the collapsed Kaelen, pulling him up despite his weight. The tunnels, Kaelen. We have to go. No, Kaelen groaned, grabbing the dagger from his belt, the very dagger he'd used to wound her. His eyes, though still swimming with pain, held a sharp, military focus. They'll track us. We need a diversion. A big one. He forced himself to stand, looking past the guards to the crypt's far side, a wall reinforced with thick iron doors, behind which lay the main explosive stores for the northern invasion force. Elara, Kaelen commanded, pushing the dagger into her hand. Take the tunnels. Go. What? No, I won't leave you. She protested, her hands clutching his heavy armor. Kaelen looked at her, his expression a sudden, deep, agonizing mix of the love of the past and the horrors of his present. I am a war criminal, Elara. I have to finish the job I started for her. This is my last oath. He slammed his fist against his own chest, a final salute to the soldier he used to be, and turned, charging toward the explosive stores. Elara watched in horror as Kaelen Varrus, her shadow general, her traitor, her redeemed captain, ran directly into the advancing wave of vampire guards, his purpose clear: to blow the Shadow Citadel's war stores and cripple Lyra's entire offensive. He was sacrificing his newly won freedom for one final act of loyalty to Aerthos. The crypt descended into a maelstrom of shadow and steel. Kaelen, now just a man again but driven by the purest form of his original soldier's courage, charged directly towards the elite vampire guards who were struggling to reach the iron doors of the explosive stores. His goal was simple: detonate the war cache. The loss of the tether focus had crippled Lyra. She was still on the ground, weakened and screaming, unable to muster the strength for a coherent attack or command, but her power was slowly returning. Stop him. Do not let him reach the stores. The remaining vampire general shrieked, diverting the guard force from Lyra to the human threat. Kaelen knew he couldn't win a fight. He fought dirty, using his heavy, broken armor to block blows and his soldiers' training to exploit weaknesses. He wasn't trying to kill, he was trying to distract and delay. Elara, meanwhile, was faced with an impossible choice. Kaelen had explicitly commanded her to escape. But seeing the man she loved, the man she had just freed, throw himself into a suicidal battle for the sake of their kingdom tore at her heart. Go. What? Kaelen's raw, anguished voice echoed in her mind, a final, clear command from the captain, not the general. Elara realized that if she stayed, his sacrifice would be meaningless. Her duty was to live, to carry the truth, and to ensure the queen's demise. She turned and fled into the dark maintenance tunnels, the blade of Astrea clutched tightly in her hand, the sound of battle and Lyra's tormented screams fading behind her. Kaelen reached the iron doors. 2 large vampire guards barred the path. They were too slow. He sidestepped one's clumsy lunge and used the heavy gauntlet of his remaining armor to smash the other's face, buying a precious few seconds. He didn't have any explosives. He needed fire. He ripped a large brazier from the wall, sending burning coals showering across the floor, then kicked open the outer latch of the heavy door, revealing the munitions piled high inside. The remaining guards rushed him, finally realizing his intent. Kaelen was overwhelmed, blades sinking into his unenhanced body, the pain intense and real. He was pinned against the door, bleeding freely, but he had achieved his position. You took my soul, Kaelen gasped, looking past the guards toward the still recovering Queen Lyra. His eyes held the fire of his reclaimed humanity. Now I take your war. With his last surge of strength, Kaelen brought the heavy, burning brazier down, smashing it against the exposed door seam, showering the flammable war stores inside with searing hot coals. The explosion was not immediate. A terrifying, silent pause descended over the crypt, broken only by the crackle of fire quickly taking hold in the munitions. Then, with a devastating roar, the Shadow Citadel exploded. The subterranean blast was colossal. It ripped through the foundations of the ancient fortress, sending tons of rock and granite skyward. The crypt, the tether focus, the war stores, the vampire guards and Shadow General Kaelen Varrus, all were consumed in a terrifying final conflagration. Lyra, partially recovered, saw the approaching doom. With a scream of pure, desperate survival, she used her remaining strength to shield herself, but the destruction was too great. The citadel, her forward base, her symbol of conquest, was obliterated. Elara, scrambling through the tunnels, felt the earth shudder and collapse behind her, sealing her exit and propelling her forward by the sheer force of the blast. She emerged onto the open slopes just as the remains of the citadel's main tower crashed down in a fiery plume, the air thick with smoke and the metallic smell of death. Kaelen Varrus, the soldier who became a weapon, had redeemed himself in the most final, absolute act of loyalty. He had destroyed the queen's invasion force and crippled her power. Weeks later, the king of Aerthos, realizing the truth of the averted invasion and the crippling blow dealt to Solari, publicly honored Captain Kaelen Varrus as a hero, a sacrifice that saved the kingdom. But the king never learned the full dark truth of the soul-tether and Kaelen's corruption. Only Elara knew. Elara had survived. She now worked in the shadows, passing crucial intelligence to the fragmented Aerthos military, preparing them for the inevitable return of the queen. Queen Lyra Aethelred had also survived. She retreated deep into the ancestral stronghold of Solari, wounded, weakened, and filled with a cold, immortal rage. The loss of her Shadow Citadel, her invasion force, and the most potent human soul she had ever claimed left her vulnerable but infinitely more dangerous. She knew her defeat was solely the work of one man, Kaelen Varrus, and the woman who freed him. The forbidden romance had ended in tragedy, the ultimate betrayal turned into the ultimate sacrifice. Kaelen was gone, but the scar of his defiance remained on Lyra's immortal heart. The Shadow General was dead, but the Vampire Queen still reigned, and the survivor, Elara, knew the war had only just begun. She stood on the edge of the mountains, watching the dark kingdom of Solari, waiting for the day the wounded queen would emerge to seek her revenge. Elara was ready. She carried the memory of the captain and the resolve of the soldier. Weeks later, the king of Aerthos, realizing the truth of the averted invasion and the crippling blow dealt to Solari, publicly honored Captain Kaelen Varrus as a hero, a sacrifice that saved the kingdom. But the king never learned the full dark truth of the soul-tether and Kaelen's corruption. Only Elara knew. Elara had survived. She now worked in the shadows, passing crucial intelligence to the fragmented Aerthos military, preparing them for the inevitable return of the queen. Her wound was a constant ache, a reminder of Kaelen's final, desperate act. She had the knowledge of vampire weaknesses and the experience of navigating the Shadow Citadel's terror. She was no longer just a sergeant. She was a specialized hunter, fueled by grief and the grim determination to finish the war Kaelen had started. She kept the blade of Astrea, its silver edge now etched with the sacred weight of sacrifice. Queen Lyra Aethelred had also survived. She retreated deep into the ancestral stronghold of Solari, wounded, weakened, and filled with a cold, immortal rage. The loss of her Shadow Citadel, her invasion force, and the most potent human soul she had ever claimed left her vulnerable but infinitely more dangerous. The psychic shock of the tether breaking had left a permanent fissure in her formidable consciousness. She knew her defeat was solely the work of one man, Kaelen Varrus, and the woman who freed him. The forbidden romance had ended in tragedy, the ultimate betrayal turned into the ultimate sacrifice. Kaelen was gone, but the scar of his defiance remained on Lyra's immortal heart. She would not forget the soldier who dared to choose humanity over eternity. The Shadow General was dead, but the Vampire Queen still reigned, and the survivor, Elara, knew the war had only just begun. She stood on the edge of the mountains, watching the dark kingdom of Solari, waiting for the day the wounded queen would emerge to seek her revenge. Elara was ready. She carried the memory of the captain and the resolve of the soldier. The dark tragedy of I was a human soldier. Until the Vampire Queen claimed my soul had finished.